Well, we're all locked up, so we can't get out to take photographs of animals, and I thought I'd take this opportunity following a comment on my YouTube channel by a fellow named Thibault to explain to you how I do some of the edits of my photographs. And in order to do that, I'm going to show you the screen here and have a sort of over-the-shoulder look at what I get up to when I edit a photograph. But I should just say to start with that I wouldn't class myself as a wildlife photographer. I would class myself as a nature photographer. And you haven't really been seeing that much of that side of my photography because I tend to concentrate on wildlife on my YouTube channel. But if I think about the breadth of my photography from wildlife on one hand, all the way through to nightscapes, so these are landscapes set under stars on the other hand, with landscapes in the middle, I would say that wildlife photos are by far the easiest images to edit, and then astro and nightscapes perhaps the most technical. So I'm going to explain my process that I use for most wildlife images. Now, I, like many photographers, I guess, out there, am pretty lazy. I really don't like sitting in here editing photos. Some people love it. I kind of hate it. So I tend to make more videos and I tend to let my photographs languish. But what I've found is that there's another side to that coin, and it is that I tend only to edit photographs that I feel are worth editing. And I think one of the traps we fall into as photographers is that we try to take a photograph way too far. And that's typically where we witness a really nice piece of behavior or part of behavior of an animal, or beautiful light, or something that's really great in the photograph, and we think, oh wow, if only I'd done this, this, and this, and this photograph was technically a little bit better, perhaps I could show it to people. And the difficulty there is that with that base in the photograph, and then the editing that we apply to it, it just tends sometimes to look a little bit too overdone. And the temptation is to do that with wildlife photos that are almost there. So I found that, this is a long way of saying it, I guess, I found that my laziness in only choosing the best of the photographs that I take means that I don't necessarily take my photographs too far. I hope I don't. And I treat them conservatively and in a way that is vaguely consistent with what they look like, remembering that I shoot in RAW, and all the images out of a camera shot in RAW are going to be pretty flat and lacking in contrast and saturation and color. So, having said that, it was a really long ramble, wasn't it? Having said that, I've got a set of images of this beautiful male lion in the Kalahari, and I think one of them could probably make, or even more than one, could probably make a nice photograph. And the reason I think that is not just because it's a nice scene, but also the technical specs of these photographs. They're shot at ISO 200, they're at 400 millimeters, f3.5, so there's a lovely shallow depth of field, but a wide field of view, and at 1/800th of a second. Now, a lion walking slowly towards you on a road deserves a reasonable shutter speed. Not too extreme, but not too slow. Something above 1/250th of a second, at least. So these images are technically okay. So that's the basis for my starting point. I feel that I would actually get something reasonable out of these pictures. Now, the second part of this is the pose and the condition and the context of the lion. So I need to choose one of this series to edit now. And these images are all marked in red in my workflow, which means they are actually all potential keepers. So I could choose any of these images as my final effort, but I probably will only end up editing one or two, not all of them. I can't be bothered to edit all of these lion pictures. What am I going to do with them all? I just want the best ones, right? So let's cycle through what we've got on the screen here. So this one I actually have done in the past. I think it's a really nice scene with the camel thorns and the road behind, a really typical Kalahari scene. So I'm not going to edit this one because I've actually done it already. So let's see, what else have I got here? Let me click through these images. This is nice as well. I like the way the mane's flowing there. Now this is actually amusing. This lion is actually having it's relieving itself. And it's making rather a nice face, and it's got this beautiful background behind it. All of these colors tie in, the darker the mane, the background, and the softer color of the sand in the background and the grass in the front ties in with the fur there. So that actually could be a nice image to choose. This one, he's looking a little bit pensive, maybe thinking about things as he's doing his business. That's a nice one. He's got his ears forward. That's great. He's interested in something off to the side. I think that could work. That's also nice. Same kind of pose, but now looking left. And then walking down the road with his mouth open, just generally sniffing the air. So I think it's going to be this one, or the ears up one here. Now, let me show you why I think it's going to be that. So if I drill into this image, and I crop in tightly, suddenly it's not a lion relieving itself anymore. It's a lion intent on something out of the frame over there. And we're thinking, what is it? What could it be? That kind of, it's not reification, but it's light reification, where we have to imagine what this guy is looking at over on the right. And that draw, or that pull, to encourage the viewer to think about something in the frame. What's that lion looking at? Generally makes for a reasonably arresting subject. So just by cropping the image, we've already added interest to it. Let's see what that looks like on the other line. It's the same kind of thing, but it's more of a regal pose. I like the mane there. Let's go to a 1:2 crop. Yeah, I think it's this one. I think this one's the winner. So, I generally don't crop my images until the end of the process. I like to keep them final edited like this in a full field, because I might want to crop differently later and I want to remember what it was like. So the last thing I will apply is a crop to a virtual copy of this image. So we're going to work with this image, and it's easy to work with because it's technically very good. There's very little noise in the image. It just needs some contrast and a little play to make it worth spitting out as a finished image. So I know I said I wasn't going to crop, but I am going to crop just to show you in this video. So let me just get into the develop module here in Lightroom, bring in a crop. I really like 2:1 crops. I've gone crazy. I like 2:1s because now I do so much video, and that's a format that I typically use sideways on a phone. So let's crop it at 2:1, see what it looks like. Let's drag it in here. I want to give it plenty of room over on the right for us to see, to imagine what this guy's looking at out of frame here. So we can look all the way across the image. I don't like these little points of grass in here, and I don't really want to get too much of a squatting position in to give away what this line is up to. So we're going to go right in here. Let's have a look. Let's try that, shall we? So I'd like to go in a bit further, I think. Just want to keep this point to the pale mane in the shot. Keep the eyes sort of near a third. Nose near a third. Let's see what we got after that. Looks alright, eh? Well, I think it does. We might disagree. There we are. Quite a nice look, looking off to the right. So what else needs to be done to this image? Well, pretty much nothing. We need to reduce the noise, we need to sharpen it up a bit, and just change the tonality and the contrast. Simple, really simple. I'm going to go into the develop module here, and just going to make sure that it's all reset to 0. So I've got some sharpening on here. I'm going to check remove chromatic aberration. I'm not going to check enable profile corrections. And that is my starting point. So let's just adjust the blacks, bring the blacks down. I can see the nostrils are starting to hit black there. I don't generally like to move the white point up to the right too much because it tends to make the image very yellow. So I'm going to judge it. Well, first I'm going to press the Alt button down, move it to the right, and just look at the image there. That's probably a bit too much for me. It's too yellow, and you can see from the color histogram that it's actually accentuated the reds and the yellows. Too yellow for me. But first, before I do anything else, let me change the color profile from Adobe Color to Camera Faithful. I really like the Faithful setting on Canon cameras. I find it to be very pleasing. It tends to emphasize browns, at least on my cameras. So let me just change it to Camera Faithful. Yeah, it's cooled it down. It's brought that yellow down a little bit, and it's actually quite nice. So let's check that white point again. So I'm just into the whites here. I'm happy. Changing the profile has worked. So I've got my black point and my white point set. If I drill into this image at 1:1, I'm kind of happy with the colors there. So I'm not really going to do anything else to that except now to try and introduce a bit of tonality. Now the problem I'm going to face when I do that is that the tonal differences between these whiter sticks and the shadows behind them are going to come to the fore, and I don't want that to happen in this image. But I'm going to apply it at the moment anyway, because I'm going to address that problem a little bit later on. So to introduce some tonality, I've got my histogram organized here. I've got a black point and a white point. I'm going to get my black shadows point here, and I want to affect mainly the midtones and just draw in a little bit of contrast into this image using my curves adjustment. So I don't want this point to be too far to the right because what it's doing is it's just emphasizing the yellows a bit too much for my liking. Right, so we're there. We'll adjust color in a minute. The next thing I'm going to do is come back to my white balance. As I said, it's emphasizing the yellows too much for me. I can see that in my histogram up on the right. The yellow and the red is too bright. I can't, or I'm not going to use the keyboard to adjust the blue color temperature. I'm going to type in a value. It's currently at 5100. I'm going to type in a value because the clicks on the keyboard are generally too high for me. And I think I'm going to guesstimate 4,900. I think that's worked pretty well. It's just cooled it down a bit. It's still a little bit too yellow for me here, but let's see where we go with that. Now, with my tonal adjustments made and my contrast adjustments made, I'm now going to try and deal with this sticky background. And the way that I need to do that is perhaps to put a radial filter over this guy's head and face, feather it a bit, I'm going to feather that, and I want to affect everything on the outside of that filter, but not his face. And that's the default behavior here. If I click on this invert, it'll affect his face or the inside of the filter. If I don't, it'll affect the outside. So now that I've drawn that radial mask, let's see what happens when I make some adjustments to contrast and exposure. Well, the first thing I think I want to do is I want to make the background much darker than it is already. Okay, and I've really introduced some tonality there. Let's just check our blacks. Well, I can't do it at the moment, but there's nothing highlighted here, so I haven't eclipsed that black point yet. So I'm just going to go right to the edge of it. Okay. So I've reduced the exposure on that background, and immediately what it's done is it's reduced a lot of the contrast. But I'm going to go further, and let's just bring these these highlights down in the image, and let's bring the whites down in the image. I think that's pretty much done it. So what I've got, if you can see in the whole picture here, is a very bright face, very present face, a darker background, very little contrast and distraction in the back. And now if I zoom in here, you can see what the effect is on this image. It's, for me, markedly better, markedly more interesting. So the next step is to apply some capture sharpening. So I'm going to come down to the sharpening control here. I'm going to zoom into a 1:1 ratio. I'm going to hold down the Alt button and just add some sharpening. Pull the radius back. I tend to like a radius of below 1. I like it at about 0.7. Now I'm going to start adding some sharpening, and I'm watching the face, particularly the nose here, the eye, and the edge of the image, and the noise characteristics in this lighter patch next to the face. I don't want to emphasize the noise that I can see there. So until I just hint at it. So it's actually come to a value of about 39. You don't have an empirical value. You have to judge it by eye. Every image is different. So this one's coming to about 39, but I can go further. I can apply some masking. There's a masking slider here. I hold the Alt button down. It's going to show me the white part of the image is what it's affecting, and the black part is what it's not affecting. So I'm sharpening basically the lion's head only at the moment, which is what I want to do. I do not want to sharpen that background at all. So here now I have a nice tonal value for the background, some interest in the lion's face, some sharpening on the lion's face. At this point, I generally leave it, but you can go further. What you can do is start to add some structure to this face by emphasizing these tonal variations in the fur. So I can make the mane darker, this dark part of the mane darker. I can add some spots of interest around the eyes here, around the edge of the eye, the top of the forehead, maybe this part of the face, the mouth, the nose. And when you do that, it can make the structural appearance of the lion very arresting and very interesting. But I find that it's really easy to go too far. You end up, once you do this a few times, you work out that it kind of is like the lion's wearing makeup. And the images where that's done become very apparent. If you look on the internet, you can see it. So you can be strategic and just apply a little bit of dodging and burning to the face of the lion. I'm not going to bother with this image. I'm fairly happy with it, and I'm not going to take it further. But you could if you wanted to. So now that the capture sharpening is applied, let's crop the image. So I'm going to crop this, and I'm going to crop it at a 2:1 ratio. So I tend to be liking that at the moment. And let's see where we get to once it's cropped. I don't want to get too much of the squatting position in. Don't think it's attractive, knowing what this guy's up to. I do want to get the corner of the mane in here. I want the eyes on the third, and I want it looking out of the frame. So once that's done, I think it's probably a little bit too far to the left. Just drag that third in over the nose. What have we got? Don't like this here. Sorry, I'm making a bit of a meal of this. I kind of like it. I think it's done. The one thing I need to do is show you a comparison of before and after of this. So here we have the before on the left and the after on the right. Simple as that.